Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Off the Shelf, your one-stop shop for the latest news here in the library and in the wider literary world. I'm Mr. Humphreys.
And I'm Miss Oliver.
And welcome, Miss Oliver.
Thank you.
Good to have you as your first time co-hosting Off the Shelf with me. So this is the last Off the Shelf of the year, but as always there's lots of news to catch up on, and I'm going to start off with talking about some of the new arrivals in the library for year 7 to 9, as per usual. So first up, we've got a new book by a debut author, J.T. Williams, called Drama and Danger, The Lizzie and Belle Mysteries. Now this is essentially a fresh and fun take on the sort of historical crime and mystery fiction genre, and there are two main characters, Lizzie and Belle, who are two black girls in Georgian London. Now the central plot is they're engaged in a race against time to save one of their fathers, whose life's in peril. He's an actor, and he sort of is involved in the Theatre Royal. And his life's in danger, but the two characters, as J.T. Williams, the author of this book, explains in the author note, the two protagonists are actually based on real people, actual black people in Georgian London, and she basically just used artistic license to sort of spin a work of fiction around these two actual historical figures. So, of course, it's something that black people are not thought of as seen as being in Georgian society at large, and so it's sort of like giving a voice to sort of underrepresented body of people, if you like, and so it's very exciting. The story, it's very pacey, as you can imagine. It's a race against time, and another thing I like about it, it's very cleverly structured because it's set in the theatre world. Drama is sort of a big part of it. And it's structured is similar to a Shakespeare play. It's got 5 different acts, and the bard, Shakespeare himself, gets referenced all the way through. And also another appealing thing is it's got lots of because it's a murder, it's a mystery, so it's got lots of like inserts and notes about investigations. Also very beautiful illustrations too. Yeah. So this certainly caught my eye. This one, so that's my first choice.
Sounds a great premise for a story.
Absolutely, yeah. As because obviously there's lots of everyone loves a mystery, right? And historical mystery, but it's sort of a different thing, different spin, different take on it. So definitely want to check out. And it looks like it's the first in the series, so we can look forward to many more installments as well.
Might have to read that.
Yes, there we go. Good. Glad to hear that it's caught your attention too. Right, so my next choice is called Fixie Fashion by Laura Strutt. Now, there's a subtitle that says How to Create an Ethical Wardrobe. Now, as the subtitle suggests, this book is about using fashion in a responsible way. Responsible in an environmental sense, because we all know eco concerns are, in our age of climate change and everything, eco concerns are very, very much to the fore of our mind. And when it comes to the annual fashion show that we have here, eco concerns definitely sort of play a big part, with very good reason. But this book, as well as drawing attention to that side of things, it also talks about how, as well as a fashion show, also for your everyday clothing that you wear, and how to sort of like making sure that you're being responsible with the clothes you wear there too. Now, it doesn't talk just about how the fashion industry can be harmful to the environment. It also talks about how it can be harmful to people as well, because sometimes people are exploited. People sweatshops, exactly. People can be sort of for very low wages to produce lots and lots of clothes, and that is also a big ethical consideration. And that talks about how you can sort of be respectful and make sure that you're buying clothes that don't fall into that category as well. So, as it suggests, it's how to create your wardrobe. So it comes up with very practical tips on how to sort of do that. So here we go. Chapter 3: Clearing out your closet. All the step-by-step guides, a sort of checklist of things you can go through. So as well as telling you why you should do it, it also tells you how you should do it. Okay, chapter 5: Shopping Smart. So I think a very useful read come fashion show season, but also in general as well.
Yeah.
So good way to sort of fix your wardrobe. I mean, it always makes me shudder to think actually what clothes I might have that might be in that category. But now's the time to start to sort of be more ethical with your fashion.
Yeah, it's very current because lots of shops now, the cotton is advertised as sustainable cotton that's used and things like that. So yeah,
absolutely. So more shops, clothing manufacturers are more keen to be. They're seen to be eco-conscious, so that can only be encouraged. That can only be a good thing. So there you go. So that's my second choice. Now, last but not least, I have got Escape to the River Sea by Emma Carroll. Now, hopefully, it's obvious to most of you who are watching this is a sequel to a true classic of children's fiction, Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson. And now, this is a sequel, yes, but it's not just a straightforward sequel. So, there's the saying how, one genius deserves another. Emma Carroll is very much considered to be the queen of YA historical fiction. So, in lesser hands, a work that sort of extends from a very well-established classic of children's literature could have been not worked out so well, shall we say. But in Emma Carroll's hands, things go well. Now she, as I say, is not just a straightforward sequel. She's definitely avoids falling into the trap of being too derivative and just, literally going, oh, what happened next? What she does instead, so it's not a straightforward continuation tale. She sort of has a different main character, but she maintains the same setting, the same exotic Amazon setting. But at the same time, so as well as having a new character and new story, but the same setting, what she does instead is to sort of pay tribute to Eva Ibbotson. The main character, what's her name? It is Rosa. The main character, Rosa, is actually a kinder transport girl. Now, for those of you who don't know, the kinder transport was refugees who were escaping Nazi-occupied countries in Europe to sort of seek refuge during World War II.
Oh, okay.
And Eva Ibbotson was one of them. And by making her heroine a child of the kinder transport, just like Eva Ibbotson herself was, she's paying appropriate tributes to Eva Ibbotson herself. So, yeah, it's perfect for fans of Eva Ibbotson, but also fans of Emma Carroll. I know we have a lot of those. You have a lot of Emma Carroll books on our shelf. So, yeah, what more could you want, really? So,
yeah, sounds a good read.
Absolutely, yes. So, yeah, Escape to the River Sea. So those are a few of the highlights we have, books for younger pupils. I'm now going to hand over to Miss Oliver, who's going to tell us about some of the recent arrivals aimed at an older audience.
So the first book I've chosen is The Dance Tree by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. And I chose this book because the title I felt was really intriguing, The Dance Tree. I like things to do with dance, and so that caught my attention. But also, when I was reading the blurb on the back, it's inspired by, surprisingly, by true events.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So this is only the second adult book that this author has written. She's much better known for children's novels like The Ink and the Stars and Julia and the Shark. But it's a historic novel as well. It's set in the 16th century in Strasbourg in France, and it centres on the outbreak of this bizarre plague that affects women and the impact that it has on this small community.
Only women, not.
Yeah, and particularly the four central characters of it.
Okay.
So it begins with this lone woman dancing in the central square, and she doesn't stop. She doesn't rest. She doesn't pause. She just continues to dance. And then she's joined by others, and they keep coming. And eventually, the authorities step in, and a state of emergency is declared. And it's just, the whole thing is set in this era of superstition and religious mania, there's extreme poverty and revolt as well. So there's lots going on, and amidst that, interwoven with it all, is the forbidden secrets, family secrets, and forbidden love surrounding the women, who themselves are actually powerless within society and their homes and church. So they're basically pushed to the edge. So it made it a really interesting read. And if you like authors like Jessie Burton, the miniaturist Muse, or Sarah Waters, I think you'd like this book.
Sounds great. And yeah, you're right, she is very well established as a children's author. The Girl Living in Stars and etc. But yeah, she's a very talented author. She writes beautiful prose. So I think this does sound intriguing. Now, obviously, the first thing that's when you were saying, oh yes, this strange plague and how a state of emergency. Obviously, that's something that happened that we can identify with recently. But but I'm sure it's got it sounds intriguing.
It does, definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, excellent, good stuff.
The second book I chose is if you're a Philip Pullman fan, and you read, as lots of us are, his Dark Materials and the Book of Dust trilogies, then this is definitely a book for you. It's described on the front as being cosmic rays from Lyra's universe, and it's full of short scenes from each of the books. And each one in turn is moving and beautiful. It's really insightful about each of the characters. So Mrs. Coulter, Lyra herself.
Fills in a bit more about backstory, maybe.
Yeah. Things that you might have missed when you've read the book initially. So little nuances about the characters. So I'll just read they're very short, so I'll just read a quick excerpt or two. So this is one about Lyra. Lyra had a crush on Dick Orchard, the other boy who could spit further than anyone else. She would hang about the covered market, gazing at him hopelessly, and cover her pillow with clumsy kisses just to see what it felt like. So that's kind of a Lyra that I don't actually really remember reading at the time, but clearly it was there.
Yeah, that's not something that would have been included, and it tells you more about the characters. And that was literally, 3 or 4 lines, and says so much about Lyra as well.
Exactly, yeah. And there's another one here, it's just slightly longer, and it's just before the big battle with the angels in the novel. Serafina Pacala on her cloud pine would find a still field of air at night and listen to the silence. Like the air itself, which was never quite still, the silence was full of little currents and turbulence, of patches of density and pockets of attenuation, all shot through with darts and drifts of whispering that were made of silence themselves. It was as different from the silence of a closed room as fresh spring water is from stale. Later, Serafina realised that she was listening to dust. I just thought that was a beautiful description.
Wow, listening to dust.
Yeah.
Just the idea of it. It's like sort of enhancing and filling in gaps, so to speak, of an already very narratively rich world, isn't it?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And in the introduction, he also explains how his ideas when he's writing are metaphorically like the dust that Lyra is investigating throughout. And he describes his mind as being like the cloud chamber that the title refers to, and the vapour within is the imagination at work. So I thought that was a really lovely way of looking at it, which, I'm not surprised coming from him. So this is basically a really nostalgic read while we wait for the final Book of Dust to come out, really.
Do you know when that is coming out?
No, I don't. No.
It can't be much longer now, surely.
He's currently writing it, apparently,
Yeah.
so
Well,
it will be soon, hopefully.
I'm sure it'll be worth the wait.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah. And my last book is a non-fiction book this time, Max Your Money, by Larry Hayes and Rachel Provost. And I thought this was a really good introduction to money, the management of money, and also to jobs. So, and we all need to know about all 3 of those things, let's face it. So it's actually broken down into 3 sections. So earn it, grow it, and use it. And it's got some really essential concepts in it. So from why some people earn more than others, brilliant business ideas, and spending ethically. So there's also, it covers some basic things like, if I show you, it's just
It certainly looks very accessible.
Yes, it really
like
is.
The layout.
So you've got different ways to pay for the things you want. So it goes through the different uses, because obviously it's not just cash.
No.
In the old-fashioned way, there's paying with plastic.
Cash has become more and more a thing of the past now, I would say.
Exactly. Cryptocurrencies, all sorts of things. It then goes on to explain how, if you'd like to open a bank account, how to go about that. So again, useful information. And there's also a section on fake money as well, which is something that we all need to be aware of, obviously.
Yes.
And as you can see, the information it's really well set out because it's colourful, bold, there's lots of graphics and pictures. So what is essentially complex information is actually presented really clearly and makes it easy to dip in and out of to find whichever bit you want to find out about at that moment. There's also a section for any budding entrepreneurs.
We do have a few of those, for sure.
Let's find it. It's here. Build your own money-making machine. So anybody out there wanting to build up their own empire like Lord Sugar, then this is the chapter to read for that. But I particularly also liked the ethical perspective that the authors have in this. There's a section on charities, but they've put one on effective giving because not all charities use the donations wisely. So yeah, I thought it covered this complex area of things overall really, really well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, worth reading if you want to be knowledgeable and confident in money.
Yeah, which I think all of us probably need to be to a certain degree. Sorry, you were saying about Lord Sugar there. I was imagining one of our pupils here becoming like Lord Sugar in the future and hosting their own reality show.
Yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, look forward to that. Anyway, look, thank you, Miss Oliver. Some very interesting choices there. Okay, so we're going to move on now to talk about some wider literary news, and the first piece of news I want to talk to you about is the Barnes Children's Literature Festival. Now, this is the Children's Literature Festival. You think of how Hay on Wye, Bill Clinton actually once said the Hay on Wye Literary Festival is like the Woodstock of the mind. This is essentially the equivalent for children's books, children's literature. Now it's into its 7th year, I think, but it's been going for a long time. It's very well established, and year on year it just gets better and better. And the lineup this year is very star-studded. We got a lot of impressive guests. Just to name a few, we got David Baddiel. We got Lauren Childs, we got Robin Stevens, the author of the Murder Most and Ladylike Mysteries, which are, some of the most consistently popular books on my shelf. So yeah, we got loads. To name just a few, that's just a few examples. And then of course we got lots of other fun and interactive workshops as well, from things like the Shakespeare Company, the Orange Theatre Company, and so on. Now there's nothing. Because we have been fortunate enough to have author visits. We had our first author visit for a long time when Ben Davis came in to speak to Year 7 earlier this year. We've been fortunate to have a lot of author visits. There's nothing like meeting an author or a storyteller or an illustrator or a poet to really bring books to life, And it should be an epic weekend. So it's actually this coming weekend. As we film this, we're filming this on Tuesday. It's coming this weekend, and it goes on until I think it's the 26th of June. So get down there. Go to the website to check out what events you can go to and when. And if you can make it, do go. Thoroughly recommend it. It's a really great fun, and of course the weather being as is, perfect conditions for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a nice sort of summer reading thing to do ahead of the summer holidays.
Okay, so I'll just talk a bit about the Year 7 transition book. So I was lucky enough to recently run a committee of Year 7 girls, and we read and discussed a range of novels in order to choose one for the new Year 7 intake in September. So thank you to Juno, Layla and Sophie for their valuable input. I couldn't have done it without them. So together they chose the girl who... Oh, I haven't got the book with me.
That's okay. It's the girl who lost a leopard, isn't it?
Yeah, by Nizrana Farouk. And this was selected because the girls felt that the themes of friendship and family, conservation and culture were really applicable to the transition into Year 7. So the thrilling adventure story is it's an excellent book choice, and it has a fictitious setting of beautiful and rich nature, a very mountainous landscape that the author was actually born in, Sri Lanka.
Yes, yeah.
That's what it's based on. So although it's fictitious, she's based it on that. And the protagonist, Selvi, is a really wild character and very determined. She faces perils and poachers in order to protect a leopard that she has befriended. So for any animal lovers, it's a must-read from that point of view alone. So we've got Nizrana Farouk coming to school. You were saying about author visits.
We do indeed. TBC, TBC, but yes, it will be sometime next year.
Yeah, and we can look forward to lots of competitions and activities related to her and the book.
Absolutely.
So we do have copies within the library if you'd like to read one. We also have, she's written lots of other books, The Boy Who Met a Whale. So if you are interested in animal stories, stories of friendship and family, that sort of thing, conservation, then I'd recommend reading any of her books.
Also very exciting, aren't they? As you were saying, like page-turning reads. So I think, something for everyone. And, you mentioning animals, I think it reminds me of Michael Morpurgo, actually. He certainly is very famous for... So I'm not saying that she's like Michael Morpurgo, but certainly echoes of Michael Morpurgo there. So and yes, they all got the book yesterday. next year's year 7. So we're looking forward to finding out what they thought about it in September. So there we go. All right, and last but not least, it being summer, a couple of book awards, a couple of key book awards have been announced, key book award winners. Now, first of all, we had the Women's Fiction Prize winner, and this year it went to Ruth Ozeki for this book here, The Book of Form and Emptiness. I'll just read you the blurb because this is quite this is quite a unique sounding book. After the tragic death of his father, 13-year-old Benny O begins to hear voices. The voices belong to the things in his house and sound variously pleasant, angry, or sad. Then his mother develops a hoarding problem and the voices grow more clamorous. So Benny seeks refuge in the silence of a large public library. There, he meets a mesmerising street artist with a smug pet ferret, a homeless philosopher poet, and his very own book, who narrates Benny's life and teaches him to listen to the things that truly matter. Blending unforgettable characters with jazz, climate change, and our attachment to material possessions, this is classic Ruth Ozeki, bold, humane, and heartbreaking. I read the blurb because I couldn't think of a way, in my own words, to sum up what this book is all about. But you can see it's a very, very intriguing premise. It's very unique. It's certainly different. Definitely. This is her second book. Her first book was called I can't remember, but that was also shortlisted for the Booker Prize. This was shortlisted for the Booker Prize too, and now she's won a Women's Prize from a very high quality field. So yeah, so that sounds like a very interesting book.
It does.
And that won the Women's Prize for Fiction. And then, of course, we have the Carnegie Medal winner. Now, Miss Rio and I talked about the Carnegie Medal shortlist in the previous episode of Off the Shelf. Now, I'm happy to say that the eventual winner was October, Katja Balin. I'm particularly happy because this is a book that I actually spotlighted in a previous episode of Off the Shelf, episode 2 to be precise. It was a very strong shortlist this year. I've read all of the books on the shortlist. I enjoyed all of them. But this is a deserving winner, I think, because it's a special book. You know, to stand out from that competitive field, the other books that are in it, they're all very good books. To stand out means this must be a special book, and it does because it's a beautifully written book. It's got a very moving and life-affirming message about it, about how the power of stories and dealing with adversity. October herself is in this sort of very unusual situation of living in the woods, being brought to by a father in the wild, and then having to go and be tamed, if you like, by urban London, living with her mother because her father has an accident. And it's just so beautifully written and ultimately hopeful and uplifting. How the power of, as I said, the power of stories can earn anyone redemption. So, as well as it winning the main Carnegie Medal, it should also be noted that it won the Shadowers' Choice Award. So it's not just the stuffy adults who picked this as the winner, but also all of the pupils, because Miss Rio and I run a reading group at Wednesday lunchtimes, and we took part in the Shadowers' Choice. All of the pupils across the land who took part in the shadowing scheme, they also said that this was the best of the shortlisted books. So, double endorsement.
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. You can't get any higher recommendation than that. So, yeah, October, the Carnegie Medal winner. Okay, so time to move on to our special guest now. Now, this episode, our special guest is someone who's got very close ties to the library. She spends a lot of time in here, but also she started out as our assistant librarian many years ago. So she's very knowledgeable about books, very keen reader, and that person is Mrs. Beard. So without further ado, let's hand you over to Mrs. Beard to tell you about some of her reading interests.
So a recent read that I really enjoyed was a book called Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers, which I picked up because of the cover, because I do judge my books by their cover, and it's got some beautiful big satsumas on the front, and I love sort of citrus fruit, makes me think of holiday. Very much not what the book is about. It's set in the 1950s in London, in the suburbs, and it's about a woman who writes to a newspaper claiming that her daughter is the result of a virgin birth, much like the Virgin Mary in the Bible. And it's the story of how that unfolds and impacts the journalist investigating it and the people around. And I loved the story in its entirety, and then I loved the fact that there's a point in the book that just makes you stop and go, what? How did I miss that? How did that happen? and it just completely blindsides you, and it was incredibly emotional, and I love it when a book does that to you and it just completely stops you in your tracks and makes you rethink everything that you've just read, and it did that, and I really, really loved it for that reason. So, much to the dismay of any Year 11 student, my favourite book from my childhood is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Not necessarily one that you would imagine is from childhood, but in Year 9 we had finished the content for the year and well ahead of the summer holidays, and my teacher in her desperation found a stack of To Kill a Mockingbird in an old cupboard in the Year 9 corridor, and decided that for the rest of the year we would sit in silence and read To Kill a Mockingbird, which I'd say pretty much everyone else in my year just thought was the worst thing ever, and I was in my element. To be told to sit and read for at least 2 hours a week, and that was all I had to do, it was the best thing ever. And as soon as I started reading this, it just changed my world. I'd always loved reading up until that point, but reading this made me realise that books can change the world. They can change a lot of things. They can change your opinion, your beliefs, your perspectives. And I think nothing is truer than the quote in this where Atticus says that you never really know someone until you put on their shoes and walk around in them. I have paraphrased there. But I think that's what this book makes you do. It makes you see something outside of yourself and your life. I think that's what all great books do, but it was this one in Year 9 that made me realise that was possible, and that was probably the start of my real teenage adult love of stories and storytelling. So for me, it's very rare that I don't finish a book. The older I get, the more I am likely to give up on a book, because life is too short to push yourself through a book that you're not enjoying. One that I did persevere with is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, because it is so raved about. So I thought, no, I'm going to do it. At some point in these 300 pages, it's going to change, and I'm going to think, this is it. This is the way everyone loves it. And it never happened. And it's been a long time since I read it, so I can no longer articulate why I hated it so much. But I just know that I didn't enjoy the tone, and I know I'm not alone in thinking this. I have spoken to other members of staff here who agree. But people that love it say how emotional and upsetting and heartbreaking it is. And I just didn't get that because of the way it's written and the tone, and it just feels so soulless. Unlike To Kill a Mockingbird that has so much soul, I felt this was really lacking. Maybe that's the point and I've missed the point completely, but I do not get the fuss, so I'm sorry if you do. So most people, I'm imagining with this, will be nobody. If anyone has heard of this, I will be incredibly surprised, but please do come and talk to me about it. So back in the 90s, lucky bags were a thing, and I don't know if anyone watching this will know what a lucky bag was. It was normally about £2. Woolworths used to sell them, and it was about the size of an A4 piece of paper. And in it there would be an assortment of objects. There would be like a chewy sweet, like a drumstick lolly, a colouring in sheet and some pencils, some tacky jewellery, and then maybe like a magazine or something like that. And I bought one once. It was a yellow one. I remember it vividly. And inside it was a book called A Special Trade. And I can't think who it's by, and I forgot to bring it with me today. But I loved it. And it's the story of Bartholomew and Nellie. And Nellie is a little baby, and she lives next door to Bartholomew, and it's about how when she's a baby and she's learning to walk and figuring out the world around her, Bartholomew helps her. And then halfway through the story, Bartholomew gets old and Nellie's grown up, and it's about the switch that happens, and all of a sudden Nellie has to help Bartholomew walk, and she has to take him out, and they go on day trips together, and he's no longer lifting her up, she's helping him in his wheelchair. And it's about how at some point in time that relationship changes. And at the time I don't necessarily think it was the sentimentality of it that I enjoyed so much, but I used to read it with my mum, and there's a line in it that we still say to each other today, and I've started to say it to my little boy, and it is, "Don't be saddish, have a radish." And it's all very obscure, but it's just stuck with me. And I lost my copy, and then for years I've kept an eye on it on the internet, and it's very obscure and it's American and it's always incredibly expensive. And then in lockdown, when we were looking for things to do and I was buying more books than ever, I thought I'm going to reignite the search, and I found it for £6 from a second-hand bookshop in Texas. So I now own a copy of it so I can read it to my little boy, and we know that if we are saddish, we have to have a radish. This one's a really tricky one for someone that has hundreds and hundreds of books to narrow it down to 3. But my first one would be, and this is no surprises to anyone who knows me, Katherine Moran, How to Be a Woman. Because short of my friends, nothing makes me laugh as much as the writing of Katherine Moran. I have been asked to leave a room when I was reading this before. I have been glared at on many a train and a bus when reading her books in public. And I figure that if I'm on a desert island, I'm probably not having the best time. Or I'll certainly be on my own. And reading her work is like having a laugh with a friend, and the kind of laugh where like your cheeks hurt there from laughing so much, and I could come back to it time and time again, and it is consistently funny. So it would have to be How to Be a Woman by Katherine Moran. My second choice, tried to avoid it but I couldn't, it is Harry Potter. However, it's not the first one. I considered the Philosopher's Stone, but ultimately it has to be the Prisoner of Azkaban, because it is my favourite of all of them. And for me, reading Harry Potter is comfort, it is home. Every time I read it, I'm back in my bedroom as a child. It's the summer and I'm having to reread them all, ready for the new release. And for me, it was this one that really started the rest of the series. I feel like 1 and 2 are very standalone, but this is where the magic really starts to happen. And Sirius Black is my favourite character, and this is where we meet Sirius. And I hadn't thought it would be the illustrated version, but as a lover of illustrated children's books, I think actually if I can take whatever I want to this island, I will take the beautiful illustrated version, because when I finish with the words, I can spend hours poring over the pictures. So that would be my second choice. And my third choice, perhaps not for any reason that you would imagine, would be an atlas. And you might think, oh, that's really clever, because then you're on an island and you can use the maps to find your way off the island. And that's not why I picked it. I was thinking, why had I picked it? And that came to mind, but that's not it. It's because I can spend hours looking at maps. And I often do. If I'm having to look anything up on Google Earth or Google Maps, I get the location, and before I know it, I've zoomed out and I'm moving around the planet and I'm looking at where things are, and I just love maps. And I would take this because, again, it's a way that I could spend a lot of time and I'd be very happy doing it. And there is the plus side of it may well get me off the island. So, slightly odd choice, but I would take an atlas of the world.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Beard. So that brings us to the end of episode 6, which is our last episode of the school year. So we'll see you in September. So remember, over summer, keep reading, and we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, take care. Bye.
Bye. Have a good summer.
Bye.